let's talk about chicken forage. Now, when I'm saying chicken forage, what I mean is leafy green plants that chickens like to eat, and hopefully they're able to go out and forage for themselves. So that's things like grass and legumes and forbs. Now, the term forbs just means green plants that animals can eat that aren't grass or legumes. So it's things like chicory and plantain, sort of the weeds that are in your lawn would be called forbs if it was a pasture. The first and easiest things for chickens to eat that most people have access to is grass. And yes, chickens can eat grass. They like it quite a lot actually, and it can form 10 to 20% of their diet, and depending on the time of year, it has more or less nutritional value for them. Chickens are a monogastric species, which means they just have one stomach, a simple digestion system. So they can't eat grass that is very mature. For the chicken to be able to eat grass, it needs to be young and green and fresh and growing, like spring grass. So if your grass have started to get older and tougher, that's not really great food for your chickens. You want to keep it nice and young and growing by mowing it and letting it grow, and then mowing it again if they're eating from your lawn. You can leave your grass to get mature and get a grass seed head on it. Chickens love grass seed. It will provide them with heaps of entertainment. They'll jump up and pull the grass down and gobble all the seeds out of the head. But in between that young growing grass and the seed head, grass isn't providing a heck of a lot of nutrients for your chickens. So just keep that in mind. If you've got medium type grass, it's not providing a lot in your chicken's diet, but if it's green and growing or mature with seed heads, that is fantastic. Another plant type that is really good for chickens are the species of plants called legumes. So that's a category with lots of different plants in it. Here I have some alfalfa, or lucerne as we call it here in New Zealand, and I actually grow this in my garden as a border around my garden beds, and the chickens like to come and graze it off, which is great because it protects what's in the garden and gives them something to snack on. So alfalfa is a legume, clover is a legume, lotus, fenugreek, these are all legumes that chickens love to eat, and even some trees are legumes, and chickens will sometimes eat the leaves of legume trees. So I find that my flock likes legumes at different times of the year. They're not super into them during the summertime, but in the winter they love them, and in the early spring they're really into them as well. They actually decimated the alfalfa patches in the garden when they had free access to it, and they haven't come away until I closed the garden beds off to let them recover. And now they're looking pretty good and the chickens are eyeing them up. So that brings us to forbs, which are just all of the things that chickens can eat that are not grass or legumes. So that is things like chickweed, which grows really well right now in the early springtime. It's a soft plant, it grows really fast, it likes very fertile, shady places, and chickens will really like this. Things like plantain. My chickens don't love this, but they'll eat it when it's young and fresh and growing, and depending on the time of the year, I think the taste changes on it. This stuff is all okay for people to eat as well, and if you have a nibble, you might discover why your chickens might not be so into it. It's a very strong, bitter flavored forb, but they can eat it, it is good for them. And things like just plain broadleaf dock, they quite like to eat that. Again, when it's young and growing, they don't love it when it's got old and mature and drying out in the summertime. And these are just things that are weeds in your garden, in your lawn, in places you don't get to very often in your yard, and they can be really valuable food for your chickens. And if you just let your flock have access to it, they will pick and choose what they want to eat from their own decision making, and you don't have to worry about it. If you're picking it to take it to them, you make sure that you have definitely identified that it is the correct plant and it is safe for chickens to eat. But we will talk about how to introduce your chickens to food if they're not familiar with it, because if they don't know that it's food, they just won't eat it and it will sit there and you've just wasted your time. So if you happen to have a flock of chickens who hasn't had a lot of experience with foraging, or they've had very limited plants to forage on, it can be hard to convince them that this is actually food that's safe for them to eat. So the way to introduce them to new foods is to chop the food up nice and fine and add it to their regular food, fed to them in the regular place that they expect to eat. So if it was a nice situation, I would chop it up into their twice daily meals and feed it out on their little feeding trays, which is great. And then you just let it go bigger and bigger. You don't chop it up as much each time. And then you present it to them without it being mixed with their regular food, but still in their eating places. And then you'll eventually get to the point you can put the whole leaf out and they will know that it is food and they'll eat it. And then they'll go and find it for themselves if they can get out to forage on their own. So that's just how you get them introduced to a new food, particularly a tree. If you want to feed them like a tagasaste leaves, which is something that I grow for the chickens, that's not something they necessarily have come across before. It's really valuable as a legume, a high protein forage. So I take the branches off the tree and chop it up into little pieces and then give it out to them in their chicken run. What do you do if you can't let your chickens out to free range, or if the weather is bad or it's winter time? How do you get them fresh green food? Well, you might not think that it's important for them to have it in their diet, but I really think that they absolutely need to have fresh green food as much as possible, because it is full of vitamins and minerals, and they're fresh. They're not sort of like synthetic ones that have been put into their chicken feed. And these plants are full of plant phytochemicals, or also known as antioxidants, which really help their health. And we don't even know all of the different things that that does for the chicken and for us. So I think let's make sure they have it. It's part of their natural diet. Let's not take that away from them, thinking that we know best. So what are you going to do? Well, the easiest thing to do is to make yourself some kind of chicken garden protection frame that allows the plant underneath. So you're going to put this over the top of an area to grow in. That could be in your chicken run. It could be on a grow bag or something like that that you make a smaller cover for, and that's going to let you grow up a whole bunch of different types of forages under here. The plants will grow through the mesh, and then the chickens will be able to graze the top off, which is important, because if you let them graze the plants too far down to the soil surface, the plant will die. So we don't want that to happen. We want the chickens to be able to graze it off, and then the plant to be able to regrow. So that's the easiest way to do it. You can make it any size that works for you. You could put it on a garden cart and trundle it in and out of their run, because soil gets pretty heavy to lug around. And there's other things you can do, like planting along the edges of the fence of your chicken run, so your chickens can peck through the sides of their fence, but they can't get in to destroy the plants, because they do like to do that. If they find a plant is particularly tasty, they will just completely decimate it, which they did to the comfrey plants that I tried to get established here. That didn't work out. They ate them all so often that the plant just couldn't get up out of the ground anymore. You can also grow greens in your garden for your chickens to enjoy. Now, I don't specifically grow stuff for the chickens, but they end up getting quite a bit of it anyway. It's a good way to clean up any older leaves or things that the slugs have got to or something like that. And you can grow them just for chickens, because the stuff that chickens love to eat is really easy to grow. So that is things like the easy to grow brassicas like bok choy and kale. Chickens love this. Provided you've introduced it to them as food, they will go crazy for it. And you can grow things like lettuce, Swiss chard, or silver beet as we call it. They really like that too. This is all stuff that I've had in over the winter and coming in through the springtime, so some of it's getting pretty old and some of it's only just getting started, but they love this. They will follow me around the garden, hoping that I will pull some leaves off and give it to them. So that's a really great way to make sure that even if you can't let your chickens out of their run, that they're getting fresh greens on a regular basis. There are lots of ways to get green foods into your chicken's diet, and you will notice that if they're getting enough of it, their egg yolks will go a beautiful orange color, and that's a great way to tell if they're getting enough greens in their diet. It can be really different between winter and springtime when they're really getting that green food happening. So however you can keep your chickens, I hope you can find a way to get them regular green foods in their diet.